are you in politics? Is that it? Because you left for a while, then you started One South Africa, and then you started Build One South Africa. Here's the thing: is a vote for you a vote for continuity, or are we gonna have like an Ahang situation?
In Conversation With is proudly sponsored by Africa Cash and Carry, Crown Mines, and shot on location at Kurtuba Convention Center.
In Conversation, we joined with Mmusi Maimane, leader of Build One South Africa. Mr. Maimane, I have to ask you, a lot of analysts, at least on social media analysts, your name, Herman Mashaba's name, people saying you should have been one. I'm trying to understand the different politics between the two of you as people, visionaries, people trying to lead South Africa. Are you targeting the same voter?
That's the problem. Firstly, Mr. Mashaba wanted to start a branch of the DA. That's why many DA politicians end up there. Secondly, when I made a strong argument to say we needed to relocate politics back to a constituency based, he said, no, they'll produce their lists. And you'll remember in 2021, I went to various communities rallying people. People said, you are fighting for independence. No, actually, I was fighting for a constituency-based model because I thought democracy works best when we can vote for the people we know in our communities to say, if you don't work, we'll take you out. And I certainly don't agree with Mr. Mashaba on immigration because I think that whilst maybe we might have a common view on the strengthening of borders and making sure that immigration works, I certainly don't think that you can be sitting intra-country and going around and saying, let's find who the immigrants are and the problems of South Africa about immigrants. So you are shielding the state from its own responsibility by doing that. So we didn't agree on some policy issues, we didn't agree on some pragmatic issues, and we didn't agree on how practically democracy needed to go back to the people. So if you're trying to synthesize...
But these highly philosophical issues...
They're not. They do eventually...
At the time when the country is burning.
No, they do eventually come to profound consequence. Because if you say to me, let's just compile a list, you and I start a party now together. We left at the same time. Let's just figure out how to start a party. Then we sit here, we pick a list. How does that... When I'm telling you, no, we can't sit here and pick a list. Let's go back to communities and ask them to do that. We're going to argue until the cows come home. And you could exacerbate the problems of society. What you want, and I think we'll work together. I don't think that the door is shut. I certainly...
Do you have a relationship with him?
Yeah, of course.
Like a personal
Of course. We speak from time to time, and I respect him as a leader. I hope he'll afford me the same. The big trick is to make sure that in a proportional representative system, we bring what we need to bring and we'll form coalitions post facto. And ultimately working together with Mr. Mashaba and many others is going to be a matter of what do we agree we need to do?
Talk to me about numbers. You just mentioned an interesting number, and you mentioned if you take the ANC, MK, and the other ANC quote-unquote branches, as you called them, you will get a number that's probably in the mid-50s, right? Even if it's conservatively. What do the numbers look like for the opposition of the status quo, the opposition of the ANC? What do the numbers look like? And who will survive? Who will not be there? We have a lot of one-man parties here, UDMs, COPEs, etc. Is this sort of future for these?
I can't speak for them. I can.
From where you're seeing the numbers, looking at the numbers.
From where I sit, let me put the question differently. The debate in this country should not be old versus... it should not be big versus small. It should be old versus new. Parties like the ANC, etc., are old and led by old people, which means projectively they are going to sadly die off as is human course. But furthermore, they are battling to come up with ideas about the future. I mean, I think our education system is still preparing our kids for the industrial era. I really think so. They are teaching kids to be factory orientated in a universe that's vastly changing. So given that, You then have to say to yourself, yeah, let's take the numbers, all of that. The debate in this country, let's look at the new ones, EFF, us, and other ones. The management of this country is about values.
Where does the DA sit, old or new?
I think the DA is part of the old.
Part of the old.
And the reason for that is because you can see the numbers. I mean, in what democracy, if the government was not keeping the lights on, water is not flowing, and the opposition is also suffering? Like, the official opposition is also suffering. It's a problem. So when you come to the new, you then have to say to yourself, what values are going to live for the next 5, 10 years? So come back to 2029, 2024. We are challenging and we want to go for 2 million votes. We've said it, we're working. The EFF is also challenging for its own votes. That's the contest. So for me, I look at the numbers and say, how are we doing relative to that? Forget the ANC. The ANC will atrophy, as it were. But if those values between those two parties, because that's what will dictate the course of where this country goes. And I'm telling you now, the debate in this country, if I was speaking to a voter now, I'd say to you, don't even panic about whether you want to vote NCTA. Forget that. Ask yourself, what choice that you made, and I speak to you as a father, your children would be proud of. Because your children are going to live in a future. They're going to live somewhere. They're going to live somewhere when they're 18. They're going to live. Will they, when they come to voting age, say, the choice you made in 2024, Daddy, has helped us today?
Talking about children, I looked through your jobs plan. I found it very interesting how detailed it is. It's a 45-page, 46-page document. And I would really encourage my viewers to go through the document. Because I'm a father, I read through the 6 sections of education, and I saw how in much detail you mapped out. I mean, you even went to the detail of saying in schools, we need more security, facilities, and these issues. You spoke about the 30% to the 50%. Tell me about your jobs plan. Tell me about the technical things, what it is you want to do different.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, we've anchored our entire plan on a job in every home. And to achieve that, we've worked out that to come back to this Build One South Africa notion, South Africa is still multiple nations, as it were. 40% of households in this country don't have income, fixed income. They rely on remittances or they rely on welfare.
Remittances meaning?
Meaning people who work elsewhere sending money home. Okay. That kind of idea. Now, we need to, when you live in a home without anyone working, imagine your kids waking up every day and no one gets up to go to work. What model are you setting up? No one goes to run a business. No one goes to a professional service. Any of that. Everyone stays at home. The indignity of that produces communities where, as Verwoerd would have said, townships become dormitories of unemployment. We have to build, so the jobs plan is built on the macro. Let's keep the lights on. Let's keep communities safe. Let's ensure that we fix the transport logistics so that people, not only goods can move around easily, but people can move around. Let's devolve policing so that we can fight crime there. But to the education thing. Education, for me, is fundamental as a transformative agent for all citizens. That's why we went to great length to talk about skilling for the economy.
That's a very big part of your 45-page document.
It is for us
Impressive.
The centerpiece. I want to say educate, educate, educate. Because we have to, of course, up from 30 to 50%. People say to me, well, it doesn't matter. I say, it does matter. You would never hop onto a plane of a pilot who said, I've landed 30% of my flights. You'd think, oh, that's taking a chance. Or you'd never go to a doctor who's only got 30%. It's ludicrous that we think people are proficient at 30%. We've got up, and when you actually interrogate the numbers, right? In maths and science, if you put the pass mark at 50%, you discover that it's less than 30% of the kids who pass at above 50%. So if we want to prepare young people for an education of the future, where they are using VRs, where they are involved in the Internet of Things, in innovation, without STEM subjects, math, science being at the centerpiece of that, we are creating another form of unemployment on a mass level. And then South Africa is not competitive. We have to build infrastructure. You know, if you've got money in this country, you'll go to a quintile 5 school, private school, or whatever. And quintile 5 schools are high fee paying schools, which means you'll be well looked after. You'll get a good education. But if you are in quintile 1, 2, and 3, poor schools, you are asked to imagine what a computer is. Imagine the internet. Why? It should be freely available. Kids must participate. Imagine if we were trying to teach mathematics and video recorded the best mathematician in the country and were able to distribute it to classrooms all across the country, how we would equalize education. We are going to create lengths about vouchers. If we spend just about 14,000 rand per child per year, what if I gave that to the parents and said, you've got this as a voucher, I've got a Jobs and Justice Fund to which I asked anyone who benefited from the past to make a contribution to it. We aggregate that cost, and then we say to the parent, out of that, you can apply, get money out of it, and then you can put in, if a quintile 5 school education is about 25 grand a month or 30 grand. Now suddenly I've brought that parent to about 20,000 rand. Imagine now saying to that same parent, now for 900 rands a month or whatever, you can now raise money, you can find 900 to put your child into the best schools that you want. We will
have you ran the numbers on these ideas within the jobs plan?
We will stop this madness of, if you ever stood on the highways of the townships in the morning on a Monday, you watch all of these buses and taxis ferry kids out of the townships to go elsewhere.
My kids went to school in Aikenhof, and I was on the board of one of those schools, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know.
And so we've had the buses. I've seen the kids. We've picked them up.
We've got to fix
it's very, very
to make sure that in your community there's the best school so that the kids can go there. So when you say, if we run the numbers, education is one of, relative to any other line item, this is an advantage of being in parliament. You know, half of the reason our budget falls apart is that we spend too much money on consultants, broadly speaking. The education budget is stretched because it's in some ways union controlled, so you pay some of the senior teachers, and in the department they pay people ludicrous things. And for more than anything, we are underinvested in even primary schools, so that you end up with the Pearls report that eventually says 8 out of 10 of our children cannot read for meaning by the time they get to the age of 10. So we're falling behind on multiple indicators. So I think we've got to rejig the budget to focus. And I think you'll discover that where technology is a multiplier, in that you can reach.
You speak about that also in your document.
You can ensure that we are able to minimize certain costs by being able to deploy technology in certain spaces. So
at 2 million votes, how many seats are you targeting? More or less?
We've got to get past 40 seats.
40.
40
seats.
And it's an important number because it's a number that lets us be able to, I want to say this to citizens. You know, I've negotiated coalitions in 2016. I know what it's like to sit in a room and argue about what you want.
You look like a very tough negotiator. You look more like an enforcer than a negotiator.
No, but I would ask the question, who do you want in the room in 2019? You are going to have, in 2024, you are going to have John Steenhuisen, Mmusi Maimane, Cyril Ramaphosa, Julius Malema. At least by favorability numbers, those are the top 5 leaders in the country. And then I think it includes Helen Zille somewhere there, depending on which poll you look at. Who do you want in that room to dictate? Again, I come back to the point I made to you as a father. The choices that your children will say, you served us well.
Who do you want in the room?
Who do I want?
Who do you want in the room with you negotiating?
I would want all of those players, and perhaps we need to be able to bring up people who share common values, because I do think...
Such as? Give me names. And who do you not want in the room?
No, let me rather than personalize it, let's make it plan-wise.
Planners.
We are not going to work with people who are corrupt. You can't sit across the room and negotiate corruption. It's a problem. You can't sit in the room and speak to people who don't care about education, care about electricity, safety.
Give me names.
So let me come back to the point.
Will you sit with the ANC in a coalition?
You can't sit with the ANC.
Okay.
For the simple reason that I can't negotiate corruption.
There are many people who said that before and eventually ended up in coalitions.
Yeah, but you'll end up negotiating corruption. Because
DA?
I don't hate the ANC. Let me be clear about that.
Okay.
I think that what I'd rather do is, and I've done this before, I've submitted to them our 10-point plan as BOSA. So here it is, Mr. President. If you want to talk to us after the elections, these are the only things we can talk about. I don't want to talk about positions. You know, we've become coalition obsessed with, hey, which position are you going to fulfill? Hey, this one is going to be this. That's nonsense. How 2016 to 2019 worked, that we kept that coalition working, it's because we had a deliberate plan. You are going to deliver services like this. We're going to do this. I even think if I stood up for the position of president, you don't want these convoluted speeches at State of the Nation. You want a reflection on the plan. We agreed in 3 months we're going to do the.
Are you going to come with your sleeves rolled up? I
I
hope I'm speaking your future.
That's
with
it.
Your sleeves rolled up.
Show up, rolled up sleeves, so that you can say, I'm not here to talk about Dintswalo and Tumamina and all sorts of things. I'm here to articulate. We agreed that we are going to split Transnet into its component parts. Here's where we are, here's where we are not. Because that it's at the end of the day, you are showing South Africans they can hold you accountable on those things. This fanfare about State of the Nation and dress codes and red carpets and all of that is nonsense.
DA, EFF, would you?
I've negotiated with all of those parties.
Would you want 2024? Would you want them
I've
in the room?
really spoken to them. You'll remember even in Johannesburg, I was stoned when I was sitting with the EFF. The EFF never joined our coalition.
Yes.
But they said they would help us elect a mayor if we needed to elect a mayor. I would help you do all of that. I draw inspiration. I draw inspiration from people like Nelson Mandela. You know, Nelson Mandela, in achieving the 94, 95, they eventually signed Constitution. I draw inspiration, maybe nostalgically, and maybe, as history, people become bigger. But he was able to speak to even people you would never think he would speak to. He was the one who would go to Betsy Verwoerd. He was the one who could be able to. So I'm fortunate. And it's a privilege of maybe having grown up from a Xhosa mother and a Tswana mother, now in a mixed marriage and all of that. I'm privileged to be able to sit down with, from Al Jamaa to ACDP to the Freedom Front Plus to the IFP to the DA to the Action SA. I have a relationship with all of those people. You know what was one of the most beautiful things I experienced the other day? When we got our signatures to participate in the elections, most of the calls I got were from across the spectrum. I had former ANC presidents calling me saying, hey, we're late. I had DA people. I had EFF people.
They're all wooing you.
I was saying...
What is it that your opposition sees in you?
I think in part...
What are the qualities they see in you? What is the qualities that people see in you as a leader?
No, I think because I espouse dignity in people. And more than anything, I would consider myself more of a bridge maker, a bridge builder, who's capable of building and bringing South Africans together. And I think even when in a tough negotiated settlement around coalitions, I found, in 2016, I can remember the IFP, I can even remember the debate between the Freedom Front Plus and the EFF. Long, deep debates. The Freedom Front Plus said, we are not coming into this thing. And we had to sit down and say, okay, the EFF are not going to be in the coalition, but here's how we're going to work these things. And I think there's a sense of, I respect all the leaders. They know I'm not corrupt. I'm not going to schneid people. I'm not going to, do things behind people's back that destroys them. But I think they also know that in a government that we would work in bringing people together, but their interest would be there. So I think that
but you speak as if politics is very clean. Politics isn't very clean.
Oh, of course,
politics isn't very that dignified. Are you in politics? Is that it? Because you left for a while, then you started One South Africa, and then you started Build One South Africa.
It's hard.
Are you in it? Here's the thing: is a vote for you a vote for continuity, or are we going to have like an Ahang situation?
No,
Something of, I mean,
I have a dream for this country. I have a vision for this country. People who have changed this country did not change. You know, I draw inspiration from leaders on my desk at home. I've referenced Mandela a lot, and maybe he's one of the leaders, but I take people like Anwar Sadat from Egypt. I take people like Martin Luther King, Helen Suzman, so many others.
Three of those people are communists.
What was ideal?
I'm worried.
Well,
I'm worried about you now.
It's interesting that you would draw Mandela as a communist, but anyway.
But I mean, the ANC, like, you know, in that sense, you know.
But people like Helen Suzman, etc. I mean,
Right.
there's so many. But the reality of it is this: they changed their societies because they saw a different society. And even the speech Mandela gives at the Rivonia trial references apartheid less relative to what life would look like without apartheid. And even so, he spent 27 years in prison before that dream was realized. You know, Ahmed Kathrada sat next to me at a meeting and promised before he passed on to say, I want to take you to Robben Island because I want you to see. And I'll never forget that. I hold that precious because he said, I was imprisoned in a world where I never heard children cry. And I want to make sure that kids in this country are free. You can't help but see the transcendental vision that these great men had.
Who are the, you know,
So to answer your specific question, this is not just about 2024. That would be transactional. We have to dream about a South Africa beyond this. Because to beat the ANC is not to remove black, green, and gold from parliament. Is to tell a story as to what happens after liberation. Because I actually want ANC voters to vote for BOSA and see their future secured within that. I don't want ANC voters to think, this one is it hates the ANC. No. The ANC played its part.
are they being the negotiator politician there?
2020, we have to build beyond. I'm being dead serious. This is important because you don't win an election until you start to win the arguments, and you don't win the elections until you can let people imagine a different tomorrow.
You mentioned leaders. Who are the leaders of today in South Africa? Who are the men and women you think who really have influence, who are of good standing, of good stature, of good ethics, of good mind, of good vision?
Yeah, I think, you know,
Give me some names.
if you look beyond just even the politics, you start to speak about people like
across the board.
Archbishop Thabo Makgoba as someone who I think has been a courageous moral voice. I think about some of the business leaders who have stood strong in fighting for issues. I think about people like Roel Khoza and Sim Chabalala. I think about even innovators. You know, you can say all you like, whether you know, it's not about the company, but I think about people like Adrian Gore in their battle for certain things. Around healthcare and many of those issues. And then when I really land in Parliament, there are so many people leaders. I mean, if I think about even the Freedom Front Plus, I think about people like Peter Groenewald, who has some very interesting views about how to be a bridge maker, you know, rather than stick to what you know. There are so many that when I look at, I think our society can be best served by being able to coalesce around those people and build. And that's why we were courageous enough as BOSA to say, let's not leave politics to politicians. Let's go out and find the best from wherever they come. So when I even look at our list of leaders, we've got young people like Ayanda Ali, really talented, former newsmaker, news anchor, but businesswoman, artist. She's come on. Nobuntu Hlazo Webster, who's a businesswoman in her own right. So many others, people who come from the UDF, people who come from people like Kusta Jack. So I happen to think that we're steeped in this country where we need to look for leadership beyond just the parliamentary spaces, but also to bring people who are not traditionally political to come on board.
There's the camera. Talk to your voters, potential voters.
South Africa is at an important point. What we cannot do is allow our politics, our own history to be divisive. What we need to do is recognize that together we can build a nation that can thrive for all our citizens. This election is a referendum about the future of this country. It isn't the only definition of what the future is. It's a referendum. The choices we made on the 29th of May will influence our kids. I'm asking you to vote for Build One South Africa because I can assure you we will build ethical leaders into government. We'll restore the capability of the state. We will put a job in every home, and that's a function of 2 million jobs over the next 5 years. And we've got a plan around infrastructure, around how do we keep the lights on so that we never have to deal with load shedding. We have a plan to make sure that police work in communities and keep people safe. We want to make sure that our education of every child in this country is one that will make them compete with everyone in the world, not just in South Africa, compete with people in the world. And ultimately, I myself, I'm asking you to vote for me, not because I think I'm the last of the greatest or the smartest, but I think that I have been in the arena. I've seen great success, I've seen great failure. I've also appreciated the fact that politics isn't just the only discipline. I've come from business, I've come from civil society, and sad to say, but as a sad benchmark, I've worked all my life to never abuse taxpayer money or steal taxpayer money. So I'm asking you to say, take a chance. Don't believe the lie that says that coalitions are going to wreck this country. Actually, they'll be the best thing to happen to this country because one-party dominance brought us state capture. Let's not believe the lie that says that there is no life after the ANC. As the president wants to call it, there's a regime change or some sponsored thing. No, it's not. This is part of democracy, and we have to go through it as a country. I promise you that the trick we've got to accept is that we must vote for our hopes, not our fears. Let's not buy the fears. Let's buy hope, because through that, we can change this country. And I want to be a part of that. And I'm asking for just 2 million votes. You might think, why 2 million? It's the 2 million votes that distinguish us and perhaps maybe parties like the EFF and that, so that the values of non-racialism that are enshrined in our constitution about dignity and economic opportunity can live on for future generations. So I speak to you, I speak to the voters and say, let your votes in these elections be the very things that one day your children will look at you and say, you served us well.
In conversation with Mmusi Maimane. Mmusi Maimane, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Always a privilege. Always a privilege.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much. That is it. And we'll be with you again soon.
In Conversation With is proudly sponsored by Africa Cash and Carry, Crown Mines, and shot on location at Cortuba Convention Center.